Reactor online. Sensors online. Weapons online. All systems nominal.
Hello and welcome to today's Battletech review. Today we're going to be looking at the Grigori at the smaller end of the Evi in the Celestial series of Omnimech. I'll be honest here, I don't have a whole lot of additional story elements to give for this particular mech. We have been discussing the Celestials for a little while now, and I'm just starting to run dry of various anecdotes and stories I can bring up about Comstar. Yes, the Grigori comes from Christian literature as one of the fallen angels, the ones that took wives amongst the children of men. At that point, I mean, I could go into all sorts of discussion of metaphysics, but I'm an engineer. I am not a philosopher or a metaphysicist. Here we got a cool dragon called Grigori as well, and Grigori Ilyich Rasputin, who was a odd individual on Old Terra. You might want to read up on him. And does it have anything to do really with Comstar and the Word of Blake? Well, not really. The Grigori is the last Celestial to have been put into production by Vapula, who directly supervised the first production runs of this particular machine for some odd reason. I think he was really proud of it. I'm not 100% sure why, but I mean, it's a mech. It does what it's supposed to do. And I don't agree with a lot of the design choices on it. It is still quite functional in the end. You get a 240 engine, which allows you to go up to 64 kilometers per hour, which is not super fast for a 60-ton mech. And it's all assembled around an XL gyro to save on weight and take up more room in the center torso. Like all Celestials, you have a small cockpit that is tied to a C3I computer and a VDNI interface. So if you are a Mani Domini pilot, you won't have any special problems piloting it. If you're anybody else, you're probably going to regret it. Another thing I don't really like about it is that it uses 11 tons of light ferrofibrous, which is really a waste. Light ferrofibrous, the inner sphere way of getting a little bit more armor for a little bit of weight trade-off on an Omnimech is never going to be a good idea because you will need that internal space at some point, and you get really a marginal increase in your protection with the light ferrofibrous, so it's really not worth it. At least, that's my opinion. It still leaves you with 28 tons of pod space on a 60-ton mech, so a little bit less than half the weight. But if you put in that C3I computer in the calculation, well, half the weight of the machine is in equipment, which is very reasonable. We won't go in order here, so I'll go by the one I like the most first, I guess, with the Echo or Eminus configuration, which is built around a Thunderbolt 15 launcher with 8 missiles. Thunderbolt 15s are nice. You get enough punch to decapitate a mech in a single shot with them. Very good range. Yes, you get minimum range on them, but it's workable. And it doesn't take too much room or is not that heavy that it can't be used. A Gauss rifle might be a little bit better in terms of calculation, but Thunderbolt 15s, I think, are quite good in most mechs in the range of, let's say, this Grigori around 60 ton. It's backed up by an ERPPC, which actually gives you a great sniping potential in both of these weapons. I probably would have used a PPC capacitor on it, but then again, it's an Omnimech, so you can switch out one of those 5 ER medium lasers that you have on the body to put in a PPC capacitor if you so desire. At closer range, you get those ER medium lasers and an ER small laser in the head to give you some moral support and some happiness, I guess. 5 ER medium lasers, that's a really nice amount of punch at short range as well. Being hit by all 5 of them will cause most mechs to tumble a little bit, or at least stumble. And it doesn't take up too much room or too much power. Of course, it does run a little bit hot, and you get 2 extra heat sinks that will do their best to try to keep you a little bit cool, but it could be a lot worse. Next up, you're going to call me crazy because I'm actually going to say that I like an improved jump jet variant. I'm generally not a fan of improved jump jets. I like partial wings, but those are more recent than improved jump jets were. I mean, technically the first improved jump jet prototypes come from 2020 or so on what was called the Griffin 2 and the Super Wasp. Very strange things that you can dig up in the Wolf Dragoons archives if you're so interested. But yes, I do like the Delta/Luminos configuration with 6 improved jump jets. That improved mobility on a 60-ton mech is pretty interesting, and you're going to be able to get pretty much wherever you want to be with that kind of jump ability. You get a light and an EVP-PC for medium range sniping. So you get into position and you start shooting those 2 big guns, and it's going to cause quite a bit of trouble. At shorter range, you get a pair of ER mediums and a pair of ER small lasers, which are decent enough. With this whole package together, you're going to be a fairly decent hunter killer. But of course, you're still a little bit slow on the ground, and burning those improved jump jets is going to run you fairly hot. Your mileage may vary, but I think this one is an interesting setup. Another jump-capable configuration is the Alpha Dominus configuration with 4 jump jets, so they're regular ones, a little bit lighter, which gives you 120 meters of jump range, which is perfectly good on a 60-ton mech that goes this speed. You're going to be able to get into position to fire your big gun, which is an EVP-PC, for mid-range sniping and a streak 6 tube of SRM in the head, so you can do some crit seeking and hunt down armor. At even closer range, you have 2 ER medium lasers and a pair of medium pulse lasers when things get really, really close. You get in, again, 2 extra double heat sinks to help manage the heat generated by all of that. It's going to have a hard time, but it's going to work in the end. Another decent hunter-killer configuration, and it's probably going to be rather functional, and you're going to be able to keep it running with limited repairs and limited restock, since there's only that streak SRM6, which will only shoot when you get perfect target lock. Configuration uniform, or the Exomus, is meant for underwater fighting. That's why there's a U in the name of it. You get 4 UMU to allow you to move quickly underwater. It's not super fast, but it's faster than if you were just walking with your mech. And it has a mass, which is pretty fun. It's a piece of equipment that you put in your mech's head that basically prevents the head and the cockpit assembly to be flooded with water if there's a hull breach. Intelligent if you want to keep your pilots alive, and it's a fairly rare piece of equipment on even underwater mechs. Probably a thing that should be looked at a little bit more by a few people. Of course, if you're a clan and you have access to Argel, the Argel is going to do a better job. For weapons, you get underwater setup, so a heavy PPC and an ER PPC, which are great underwater. They don't really lose any range, and will allow you to give a good enough punch that you might breach the hull of whatever you're shooting at, with 2 ER medium and an ER small laser at shorter range. Since you're underwater, the heat sinks are not going to have many problems. They're going to run at peak efficiency at all times. To see well underwater, because there's times where the water is quite muddy or the water is quite dark, you do get a Beagle Active Probe as well. I think this is one of the better underwater combat configuration out there. The Invictus primary configuration is an all-range missile boat, and that's why I don't like it. You get a 20 rack MRM for medium range, a 15 rack LRM for longer range, and a streak 4 tube of SRM to bust up tanks and blow stuff up when you get in closer range. All the ammo is crammed in the right torso with a case. So you have 1 ton of MRM, 2 tons of LRM, and 1 ton of streak ammo in that right torso, which people learned to target over time. Really, I would prefer 2 15 rack LRMs or 2 20 rack MRMs. Take all that ammo in one type of missiles, just because while you're able to do things at all sorts of range, you're going to run out of ammo fairly quickly. The MRM is not the most accurate weapon. The LRM has that minimum range. It goes all over the place. The top hat is a light PPC, which is very nice because that's your one weapon that won't run out of shots. And you have a retractable blade on the arm opposite the MRMs, so you can punch and stab people at the same time. I've had a few people say that they much prefer hatchets to retractable blades. I'm not a huge fan of melee weapons At least not on mechs like these that are meant for fire support. In a brawler mech, very good to have it. Again, if you had two 20 racks MRM and that retractable blade would make more sense. You get in, you start shooting those MRMs, you keep getting closer, you start punching. If it was only racks of 15 LRMs, you wouldn't need that retractable blade and you would probably be able to use it for something more useful like more ammo or another like PPC or something along those lines. Communist Charlie configuration is another missile battery, but this one is more sensible and is really meant to be a brawler with 3 10-rack MRM and a pair of 6-tube Streak SRMs. So you will have to get into brawling range with this, but once you are in that range, it's going to start to hurt pretty hard. Once the ammo runs dry, you do have 2 ER medium lasers to still deal some damage, and unfortunately that won't be Unfortunately, this won't take very long because you really only have 1 ton of each of the appropriate ammo. The Guardian ECM that you have on there also protects you against enemy ECMs that would try to break up your C3I, which is pretty important when you start using these types of weapon that have a more limited range and worse accuracy. Is there things that you could move around there? Maybe. I'd have to play with that design a little bit more. It wasn't the most popular ones in the ones we received in various forms of disrepair. The Infernus Bravo configuration keeps the missile energy going with an MML7 in each arm with Artemis 4. So you might not have that many missiles, but whatever missile you actually manage to hit people with, well, most of them are going to hit. You only get 2 tons of reloads on those, so if you're carrying double SRM, double LRM, you're going to be able to last a while. If you're carrying one of each, it might get tight. Your shoulder gun is a plasma rifle with 2 tons of reloads also. In this case, that's about 20 shots of the big gun, which is a little bit tight, but could be a lot worse. You get a medium pulse laser and an ER small laser when things get much closer. And you get 4 jump jets to jump around and position yourself to fire all of that weaponry. Not one of my favorite. Maybe move those MMLs to something more significant. SRM6, LRM10s. I don't know. I'd have to play around with it more. But I think plasma rifle and some lasers, always a good combination. Configuration Sierra Kestis uses a whole lot of experimental weapon to make a mark. The main gun is a silver bullet Gauss rifle, which is basically an LBX Gauss rifle. It's been around for a while now, but nobody really ever put one into full production. I'm not 100% sure why. Maybe it'll become more popular in the future. I really would not know. At closer range, you get 2 medium X-pulse lasers, giving you decent range and firepower and accuracy in the trade-off of being really, really hot. The final weapon on there is a Streak 10-rack LRM, which is also used for long-range support, and used on other Kestis models from the Celestial series. So I have a sneaking suspicion that someone at Gibson knew how to build those Streak 10-rack LRMs, but not much of the other ones. There is a custom configuration from Presenter Sigma Tamiel that I think is worth talking about because it's been actually used by a few different people. For mobility, it adds 4 jump jets, so you get that 120 meters of jump range. That's basically why I say always keep the jump jets in the pods. If you hard mount jump jets on a machine, you're always going to have them. If you don't need them, you can take them off if you're an Omnimech. And it doesn't make the design all that much more complicated, at least nowadays. When they started building the first batches of Omnimechs, the first generation, I can understand why they add some more art-built stuff in the machines. Nowadays, not as essential. All right, now for weapons, it add a pair of Thunderbolt 10 launchers, giving you a very nice long-range punch in 2 big missiles. One of the advantage of 2 big missiles like that is if the other guy has anti-missile systems. If you had 1 big missile, your 1 big missile might get intercepted. With 2 smaller missiles, well, one of them has a good probability of going through. At closer range, it also had a snub-nose PPC, which is ideal in this kind of condition with this kind of mech. The whole thing was also protected by a Guardian ECM, all of which I think are great additions and would make a very decent standard configuration. I'm not really a huge fan of most configuration of this design outside of the first few we discussed and that custom one at the end. A lot of them are all over the place and they lack a certain focus. Sometimes when designing Omnimechs, at least configurations for Omnimechs, you better just focus on one thing or two things and just go with that rather than go everywhere. It's also very slow for a small heavy, especially with an era with light engines and XL engines. And you couple this with this mech having an XL gyro, well, you got everything that could be risky on one machine. Always a bit of a trade-off to have some of that weight-saving technology. I won't say no to having to refit one or rebuild one, but I think there are better options in the same weight range, in the 60 tons, that you can get. That would probably run you not as much C-bills to buy, or as much cost in putting it in the shop and trying to rebuild it to proper configurations. So I hope you guys have a very nice rest of your day. Thank you for listening to me for so long, and I will see you guys later. Bye-bye.